Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 214. Inshallah, the last one before Ramadan starts, hoping that it starts at the weekend. Just a quick recap, because we're just doing a few of the stories related to the Prophet's household. And then, inshallah, moving on to the farewell pilgrimage, perhaps next week, inshallah. And so for the last couple of weeks, we've been doing, as I say, that prophetic household. So just a quick recap in terms of the wives of the Prophet. Obviously, the first wife and from before prophethood into the start of prophethood was Khadija bint Khuwaylid. And with Khadija, the Prophet had children, including Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima. Fatima went on to marry Ali bin Abi Talib, and they had four kids: Hassan, Hussein, Zainab, and Kulthum. The other wives of the Prophet, we mentioned Sauda bint Zama, Aisha bint Abu Bakr, Hafsa bint Umar, Zainab bint Khuzaymah, who passed away after a few months of the marriage. Then there was Salama, Hind, Zainab bint Jahsh, Juwayriya bint al-Harith, Habiba, also known as Ramla, Safiya bint Huyay, Rahana, and then we briefly mentioned Maria, the Coptic Christian who was gifted to the Prophet, but we'll do more of that, inshallah, today. Last week, we talked about how Ibn Abbas was following Umar around when Umar was Khalif for a whole year, wanting to ask him who were the two women that were referred to in Surah al-Tahrim by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he found an opportunity to ask Umar, who basically said this was relating to Hafsa, his own daughter, and Aisha. And then he went through the whole story of how Maria, which we did a couple of weeks ago, how Maria was leaving the house of Hafsa, and then Hafsa obviously got upset. And then we mentioned how last week the Prophet ﷺ had separated from all of his wives for a whole month. And that was partly because his wives were demanding things in terms of better standard of living, essentially, and the Prophet was not one who wanted to live in that lavish lifestyle. So that obviously caused friction between himself and all his wives, who all collectively lobbied for that. But we talked about how the Umar was recounting the story of how he heard about the Prophet separating from his wives for a whole month. He went to the mosque, and then he went to ask Aisha, and then Hafsa, and then we talked about how Hafsa had previously been given one divorce by the Prophet, who then took her back on Allah's command. And then we talked about how Umar tried to diffuse the situation with the Prophet whilst he's in his sort of mezzanine anteroom inside the mosque, his own sort of man cave or personal office, as it were. And then he was talking about how the women of Medina started answering, or the women of Medina were answering back to their husbands, which is something different to the women of Makkah. Generally never answered back or rebuked their spouses. And then the Prophet became more warmer towards Umar when they were talking about this. And then Umar, looking around in this room where the Prophet was, how he got quite upset that there's hardly anything there. And this is, the leader of the Ummah, the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet then mildly rebuked Umar for saying that, by saying basically that the Muslims are promised so much more in the next life, and so it shouldn't really be so upsetting for us if the pharaohs, the emperors, and the Najashis, whether they've been given a lot in this life. And then we finished off by the ultimatum that the Prophet gave to his wives to basically say, either you accept the existing lifestyle and have a great hereafter, or if you really want the riches of this life, then an amicable divorce can be arranged. So that was where we sort of left off, or finished rather, and all of the wives, obviously, because they are mothers of the believers, they all chose to remain married and accepted their existing lifestyle. So that's what we did last week. And then just to tie up a couple of things which we've referred to in passing, but just to sort of complete it. And again, this falls, the death of the son of the Prophet Ibrahim, this happens in the period between Tabuk and the year of delegations and the farewell pilgrimage. So that's the reason to talk about Maria, who was the Coptic Christian. She was, as we said before, gifted by the Muqawkis, who is the sort of vice regent, the governor of Egypt, appointed by the Roman emperor. And his name in the Christian literature is Cyrus of Alexandria. In the Muslim scriptures, he's known as Juraij ibn Muhammed. And Juraij, he'd obviously received a letter from the Prophet ﷺ inviting him to Islam, as did Heraclius and Khosrow and the Najashi. And Juraij was a learned man, was a monk, a scholar of Christianity. And so he didn't rip up the letter, nor did he decide to follow the Prophet ﷺ. So he negotiated a sort of very political response, essentially, to receiving the letter of the Prophet ﷺ. So he acknowledged implicitly the Prophet ﷺ was probably a true prophet, but obviously didn't want to give up his lifestyle and his religion, his authority, and so treading that fine line between, as he saw it in material terms, the Roman Empire and the growing Muslim rule. He could obviously see the signs of prophethood there, but wasn't strong enough to make the plunge. So, as part of his placating of the Prophet, because obviously the demands are, become Muslim. If you don't want to become Muslim, then accept the jizya, or accept to pay the jizya, accept Muslim rule and authority over your land. You can remain a Christian, but you need to pay jizya, or the tribute. And failing that, so essentially the political system, the government, becomes an Islamic government. And failing that, then be prepared for war. So he wrote back. Obviously, he corresponded with the Roman emperor Heraclius, and essentially was told to be polite to the Prophet ﷺ. So rather than, as I say, tearing the letter up like Khosrow from Persia, what Juraij or Cyrus did was basically send lots of gifts to the Prophet ﷺ. So he didn't tear up the letter. He gave sent substantial wealth over to the Prophet ﷺ. Wrote back a fairly polite letter, declining the offer, and basically sends what's recorded as 1,000 satchels of gold, lots of fine garments. He sends a donkey called Duldul, which becomes the Prophet's personal donkey, Duldul. He sends a servant by the name of Ma'bur to be the Prophet's servant. He sends lots of gifts, including honey. And there's another sort of story about honey related to the Prophet, which is sort of quite weak in narration, but we might cover it. He sends honey, and he sends two sisters who have been dedicated by the noblemen amongst Christendom to service of the church. And again, this is a concept we've seen in Judaism, where Maryam was dedicated to the service of the temple when Isa was born. And again, it's the same thing where you have noblemen who donate their children to be brought up in this sort of monastic environment by the church, and then they become essentially church property. So the Cyrus, he gifted these two sisters, who were said to be both very beautiful, as part of this sort of package of gifts to the Prophet's son. And these two these two ladies, sisters, were Maria and her sister Sirin. And so they, as I said, were from a noble family. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gifted the second of the sisters, Sirin, to Hassan ibn Thabit, the poet, and we've talked about the poet before. And Hassan and Sirin, they had a child called Ibrahim ibn Hassan ibn Thabit. And the Prophet ﷺ, he kept Maria for himself. And obviously, in Islamic, in the Sharia, we can't marry two sisters. So the Prophet couldn't take them both. So he gifted one to Hassan and then kept Maria as his own, and accepted the polite letter from Cyrus. And the Prophet turned to the Sahabae when he received these gifts, along with the letter, to say, this evil person, referring to Cyrus, has managed to preserve his kingdom by being polite to me, but his kingdom won't last. So we saw with Heraclius, again, he was polite in his response to the Prophet, to the letters. So his kingdom was intact during his lifetime, but after Prophet died, obviously lots of Byzantine territory fell to the Muslims. Khosrow, the Persian emperor, he dramatically ripped up the letter, and because of that, Prophet predicted that his kingdom would be snatched away from him, and that's essentially what happened when the Muslims conquered within a few years of the Prophet's death. And Amr ibn al-As, he conquered Egypt during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, obviously after the time of Cyrus. So again, his kingdom was taken away, the Muslims conquered it, but he himself protected himself from the sort of ignoble outcome of having his territory taken away whilst he's alive. Then there's another story relating to Maria and Ma'bur, who was the slave gifted to the Prophet. There were, because you've got these three Christians who have been sent to Medina. One of them obviously is with Hassan bin Thabit, and Ma'bur is the servant who's with the Prophet. He is, it said, related to Maria, a cousin or a distant cousin. And again, there are a lot of people who are looking for faults even in the Prophet or the household of the Prophet or the entourage of the Prophet. So they started to make up rumors, essentially nudge, nudge, wink, wink type of thing, saying, doesn't the servant Ma'bur visit Maria often? And then they're sort of, hinting that there's some impropriety going on between the relationship of Ma'bud and Maria. So the Prophet, he obviously hears this. He's got his own intel network still. He hears this. So then he turns to Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is obviously from Al Bayt. He's as we saw before, matters relating to the personal household of the Prophet. The Prophet always asks Ali to intervene or to check things out. So obviously on this occasion as well, he turned to Ali and commanded Ali to take his sword and to deal with Ma'bud, find out what's going on and to deal with the situation. Because obviously we can't have these types of rumours swirling around. So Ali then asks a very sensible question, basically saying, should I go as a silent person who just hears and obeys, or should I hear and see what the person, what the absent person will not hear and see? So essentially saying, are you giving me a command to go and sort this out? And, I will take care of Ma'bud in that sense. Or do you want me to investigate and find out what the situation is? Are there any truths to the rumors? And the Prophet ﷺ basically says, no, go as someone who sees and hears. So it's not to go as an executioner, but to go as an investigator, come enforcer. So it said that Ali obviously took his sword with him, because that was part of the command, take your sword with you. And so when Ma'bud, he saw Ali coming towards him, he's obviously aware that there may be some rumors going around. And so it's saying that he panicked, basically. And in part of the panic, he climbed up a tree and then sort of fell down. But as he's sort of falling down or sort of running away, what happened is that the garment he was wearing sort of came unhitched, and he accidentally exposed his aura, his private parts. And then Ali could see in all that melee, when he'd exposed his private parts, but essentially he'd been mutilated, let's say. So whatever the accusations were could not have been fulfilled, because he didn't have those male organs, because he'd been mutilated. Hence, he was a slave, and this was a common practice in those times and in other societies as well, where people who are serving, males who are serving within the household of the leader, they tend to be mutilated, so there's no temptation for them to do things which they shouldn't do. And so when Ali saw that, he went back and reported to the Prophet ﷺ, and the matter was obviously closed. So that's another story we know about Maria. It's not clear when Maria became a Muslim. So obviously, when she was gifted to the Prophet ﷺ, she was a Christian, but then obviously living in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, and as we said last time, she was because of her beauty, she was the Prophet ﷺ gave her a house outside the center, or outside of downtown Medina, so some of the other wives wouldn't get too jealous. And it said that, and that's where she was. And then she gave birth to Ibrahim, and this was probably in the 8th year of the Hijra. Some narrations say Dhul Hijra of the 8th year. Maria gave birth to Ibrahim, and obviously the Prophet was really happy. And when he found out that Maria had given birth to a son, he said last night, he called the people and said, last night a baby boy was born to me, and I shall name him the same name as our father Ibrahim. And then he went on to say that Maria's child had freed her. And again, this is a fiqh issue. So although she's bound to the Prophet as somebody who is bound and gifted, a concubine, the Sharia dictates is if you have a child from that relationship, once the child is born, the child has full rights as a legitimate child, and it's treated exactly the same as any other child of the father in terms of inheritance, in terms of taking the father's name, status, etc. So the child is born to the bed it's born. So everything is above board and legitimate, and the child has all the rights that are enshrined in the Sharia for any son or daughter. And then when that happens, the slave woman, she automatically becomes what's known as an al-Walad, which means she's no longer that category as a concubine. She can't be transferred, ownership can't be transferred, she can't be sold, and she is granted her freedom as soon as, some scholars say, as soon as as soon as the owner passes away, she becomes free. So that's the ruling with regard to that. So when Ibrahim was born, obviously we know that a lot of the ladies in Medina, the Ansar ladies in Medina, they were sort of vying for the blessings of becoming the wet nurse or the foster mother to Ibrahim. So again, and that, again, we also know is an employment. So anyone who becomes a wet nurse or a foster mother, they get paid a salary for looking after the child and feeding them, and that's common practice. And again, that is enshrined in the Sharia. And so, there was obviously a lady who became the wet nurse to Ibrahim, and there aren't that many other stories in terms of Ibrahim as a child. It's said that he lived for 16 or 18 months, and the next time we encounter Ibrahim is on his death. And that is at the sort of the first few months of the 10th year of the Hijra. So, we've gone through the year of delegations, which is essentially the 9th year, and we're into the 10th year when the Prophet's son passes away. And again, 16 to 18 months old is when children are really cute and cuddly. They're starting to walk and interact and recognize faces. You get sort of banter between parent and child, and it's a really good age for bonding. So it's a really sweet and tender age. And obviously Allah wanted to test the Prophet ﷺ even more, and Ibrahim fell ill at this tender age. And as he's about to die, and again, in those societies, people know the signs of when people die. It doesn't just happen just like that. The Prophet was called, and then he was cradling Ibrahim and holding him in his hand as Ibrahim was sort of breathing his last, coughing and wheezing. And then as the Prophet was cradling Ibrahim, he begins to cry. And then the some of the Sahabi who were around, they're astonished that the Prophet ﷺ is actually crying, because they've never seen the Prophet ﷺ cry, and obviously he doesn't generally cry out of sadness in public at all. I mean, there's lots of narrations where he cries for the ummah during dua, and he's crying for the ummah during, when he's doing bayans or doing dua or before a battle. But in terms of this sort of emotional crying relating to sort of this sort of type of life event, people haven't seen it. So and again, the Prophet has this really sort of almost sort of living legend status amongst the people. So when they see him crying, saying, oh, you also cry, O Prophet. And then there's the really, really famous phrase of the Prophet, which we take comfort from. And again, in these really stressful situations where Allah protects us from these types of stressful and extreme situations. But the Prophet, his response, it was beautiful. And he goes that the eyes cry, the heart is sad, but we only say that which pleases our Lord. And were it not for the decree of Allah that has come to pass, and that the latter amongst us shall meet the former or the earlier, we would be much more grieved at your departure. And we only say that which pleases the Lord. So really profound advice for us all, especially going through difficult situations where basically, the Prophet is saying, look, this is the qadr of Allah. It's fine to, be emotional. The eyes cry and the heart is sad. These are natural human emotions, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of being human, right? And that is, what is our makeup, and we can't really control those things. We can sort of, modify them to some extent, but when a close dear one dies, you are going to be sad. Being sad and crying is not a bad thing. And again, we've previously talked about the Prophet ﷺ, that he was sad and depressed for a whole year, or many months, and that's known as the year of sadness. When Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib passed away, he was sad and depressed, and there's no that's a natural human reaction. So there's nothing wrong with being sad and depressed, and these are human things. And the Prophet ﷺ is validating that. So when you go through something really serious, don't feel guilty for crying or to be sad at the situation. However, the eyes cry, the heart is sad, but we only say that which pleases the Lord. And again, really profound, because our actions, talking is an action, our actions that we initiate are things that we control. So the way we respond to these stresses and life events and crises is what is important. And we shouldn't go around blaming Allah, doing the what ifs, and accusing Allah of things that we have no right to accuse him of. And so, we should be careful about what we say, what actions we do. We don't go around wailing. We don't go around, accusing Allah of being evil or bad, or of those types of things. We accept the decree of Allah, right? When the Prophet said, were it not for the decree of Allah, the qadr that has come to pass. So this is outside our control. This is outside our sphere of influence, right? This is in the sphere that controls us. So we only say and we only react in a way which pleases our Lord. And again, that's giving a nod to the dua of Yaqub. When Yaqub was saying, look, I only complain of my pain to my Lord, right? And so, when he lost Yusuf and Benjamin, he was basically saying, look, you don't see my pain and suffering, but I am. But I only have that conversation with Allah, right? And I only seek strength from that conversation with Allah. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us. So the eyes cry, the heart is sad, and we only say that which pleases the Lord, and were it not for the decree of Allah that has come to pass, and that the latter amongst us shall meet the earlier. We're all going to be together, inshallah, in Jannah anyway. It's just a matter of timing, right? So we will meet again, right? And again, we would be much more grieved at your departure. Obviously, if we weren't going to meet up again, then that would be quite stressful. But we are going to meet up again in a better place, in a happier environment. And again, we only say that which pleases our Lord. So this is a really important coping strategy that the Prophet ﷺ is trying to inculcate in the Ummah, the way he reacts to this severe tragedy in his life. This was the qadr of Allah, and we're going to meet up again, but we control our tongue and our actions. So, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed Salatul Janazah for Ibrahim. And again, there's a lot of fiqh around that. Ibrahim is buried in Janazah al-Baqi, the graveyard. And again, we still, even though the sort of some of the mausoleums have been raised with the sort of previous administrations, we still know the places where Ibrahim is buried, and the wives of the Prophet are buried, and Maria, she is also buried in Janazah al-Baqi. So obviously she is buried as a Muslim there. And again, we need to realize that the Prophet ﷺ, he is 61, 62, right, when this is happening, right? And he's gone through so much stress in his life. His mother died. His father died before he was born. His mother died, when he was 6. His grandfather died. His wife of 25 years, Khadija, she died. His uncle who raised him up, Abu Talib, he died. All 3 of his 4 daughters died, right? And amongst his children, all of them, apart from Fatima, they've all passed away. So obviously he was really happy at the birth of Ibrahim, but he knew, because Allah had predicted, that he would not be survived by any male lineage. And again, he's tested by these things by Allah to raise his rank in Jannah. And if the Prophet ﷺ, as a human, can go through this, the hardships that we face, we should take comfort from the way the Prophet ﷺ dealt with that, and try to strengthen our approach in those things. So the other thing with regards to the other story with regards to the death of Ibrahim is obviously that coincided with a solar eclipse. I'm not sure, not checked out whether it's a full solar eclipse or a partial solar eclipse, but there was a solar eclipse the very morning that Ibrahim died. So Ibrahim died. Within a few hours, there's a solar eclipse, and again, that's a traumatic event for the people. And so, and it's natural for superstitious people or people in those societies, primitive societies, let's say, to make a correlation between the fact that there's a solar eclipse or any type of eclipse and the death of someone important. So rumors started to spread that the sun is grieving at the sorrow of the Prophet ﷺ. And again, it's you can see how plausible that type of reaction would be in that type of society. So they're saying the sun is grieving at the sorrow of the Prophet ﷺ. So the sun is trying to shield itself behind the moon. So so that sort of rumor is spreading, and again, that's becoming so viral amongst the community. That's trending so much. Everyone is is taken in on that sort of viral rumor and gossip, that the news obviously reaches the Prophet ﷺ, even though he is grieving and wanting to sort of have some private time. So what the Prophet ﷺ does, and again this shows his greatness essentially as a human being. He's not going to lose anything by just letting that rumor spread, because it's acceptable that he's got other things on his mind. But despite losing his son, as the messenger of Allah, he gathers the people in the masjid and starts to give a khutbah to clear up this superstition. And he says, and this is reported in Bukhari and Muslim, that the sun and the moon are amongst Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's signs, his ayah, and they do not eclipse for the death or the life of someone. So when you see an eclipse, hasten to make dhikr of Allah and perform the salah of the eclipse. So again, just really, nipping things in the bud, right? To quash any sense of these superstitions, right? And basically saying, look, that's a celestial event. That celestial event has nothing to do with what goes on earth. They're two completely independent things, and they're all within the confines of the qadr of Allah. So he's trying to use the painful death of his own dear son to teach us something very, very profound, right? And so again, this shows his greatness in terms of the iconoclasm, the knocking down of these superstitions and these myths that are amongst the people. So again, that's what happened there. So just to finish off, then the scholars have said that there are quite a number of not reasons or benefits, but there's wisdom in the fact that Ibrahim passed away when he did as a young child. As we mentioned before, in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Muhammad, and one of the times where Allah refers to the Prophet by name, Muhammad is not the father of any one of your men, but he is the prophet and he is the last of the prophets, and ever is Allah of all things knowing. So Surah 33, verse ayah 40. And again, Allah, is very specific about the fact that Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, right? Not any of your males, not any of your boys, but not the father of any of your men. So again, obviously the Prophet ﷺ knows that he will not have any male offspring that will grow to adulthood, because this is predicted and mentioned in the Qur'an. And so Ibrahim, he never got to that stage where he could be even considered a man. He was always a child, not even a boy, just a child, a year and a half max, right? So we're, there's the later on the Prophet was asked, about Ibrahim and what his situation, as it were, and the Prophet said, Allah has given Ibrahim a wet nurse in Jannah. And then there's attached to that report, Anas ibn Malik, he expands to say that if Ibrahim had lived, he would certainly have been made a righteous prophet. So obviously, if the Prophet ﷺ had a male lineage, then obviously that child would have been first in line to succeed the Prophet would have, been of a great stature and have, would most likely have been a prophet. This is what Anas ibn Malik is predicting, that in his opinion, that if Ibrahim had stayed alive, he would have, been a prophet. But Allah has mentioned there will be no prophets after the Prophet ﷺ. Therefore, it was there's the wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking Ibrahim's life. And again, we can see that even amongst Christianity, you've got the Da Vinci Code, you've got these other things where you've got these conspiracies and these theories about the male lineage. If and again, from that tribal society is really the male lineage is where people see the authority carrying through from father to son, etc. So if there was any male lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, it would naturally be that the people, and especially those with a tribal inkling, would automatically want that male lineage to be in a special and to take ruling. We can even see now amongst the people who follow al-Bayt, the Shia, that despite the fact that it's not a male lineage, it's from the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, that we have the offspring. That you can see how much they elevate the status of the family of the Prophet ﷺ through the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. Had there been a male lineage, the issue would have been far, far more complex than it actually is. And there's another famous hadith in Tirmidhi where the Prophet ﷺ says, whosoever's good deeds hold him back, his lineage won't push him forward. Basically, everything's down to your good deeds, right? Being a Sayyid or having that noble lineage, that in of itself doesn't really count for anything, right? Not on the Day of Judgment. If you are a blessed, if you have a blessed lineage and you do good deeds, well, that's great. But having a blessed lineage in of itself doesn't, carry any extra kudos. So, and so this is really important. And again, this may be one of the wisdoms why Ibrahim was taken at an early age. A couple of final things just around all of these things. I think I'll try and quickly finish, and then we can start with the Hajjat al-Wada next week as a separate starting topic. So some of the benefits from these stories that we've talked about the last 3 weeks, including this week, around the household of the Prophet ﷺ. One of them is obviously the simplicity of the lifestyle of the Prophet ﷺ. When you have to forego luxuries, not for yourself, but for your family and your loved ones, that can be particularly hard. But here you've got the Prophet ﷺ insisting on this very austere and frugal lifestyle, not just for himself, because that's what he's used to, but for the ones he cares about, his wives, and so, and that, just demonstrates his authenticity as a human being, but also the simplicity of how he actually lived his life. And we saw that in terms of his relationship with his wives, but also, that his house, and we know how sparse his house was, right? And how, he would go, even sort of in these days, days and days without eating meat, or weeks without eating meat, and not having luxuries, and always giving away, any wealth that comes into his house. And again, his sort of little private office, his mezzanine antechamber, again, hardly anything there, just some a leather skin for water, some handful of wheat and barley, and that's it. So the simplicity of the Prophet's lifestyle, and also we can see how human the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are and the Prophet ﷺ himself, right? And again, Allah could have made it that the Prophet ﷺ's domestic situation would be bliss, that there would be, that there would be no issues between him and his wife, or even if they were, that we would not hear about them. But what Allah is demonstrating to us as the Ummah is that the marriage is difficult and you have to work at it. Even the marriages of the Prophet ﷺ had disputes. He'd given Hafsa a divorce once, then took her back. And here he'd separated from his wives to give everyone, a cooling down time for a whole month. So even, the stress had got to the Prophet ﷺ so much, and the tension between him and his wives had reached that stage that he even offered them all a divorce, right? So it just it shows us how we can try to resolve these types of issues. It's not that these things are taboo, we ignore them. It's that, you can try, try to mediate, you try to sort it out amongst yourselves. Then there's a period of separation, and then you can get people involved. You can get, people involved from both parties, try to reconcile. So there's a way in which we can do it. But again, it just shows that, these things, even in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, his wives would shout and answer back to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So things that no one else can get away with, his wives obviously got away with, because it's a special and a different, unique relationship between a husband and a wife. And it's a message for us how to cope with our own marital issues, because we all have them. And again, that's natural. But they were resolved in this situation. We know from other hadith that of the things which Allah has permitted, the thing that He likes or dislikes the most is the divorce. But sometimes it has to happen, and that's perfectly fine. It's it's there in the Sharia. And the other thing we can, we know about the Prophet ﷺ and his domestic situation is that even though he had this tense time with his wives, he never once lifted his finger against any of his wives. And the famous hadith of Aisha, where she says, "Wallahi, never was the hand of the Prophet ﷺ lifted against any woman or any of his servants or slaves." Okay, so again, although these things were socially acceptable to hit your wife or your slave at the time, Prophet ﷺ, he bucked the trend even then, and he would never do those types of things. And again, that's leaving us a lesson how we should live and deal with these types of stresses. And again, the other thing we learned was that obviously if there is a serious a domestic issue, then Allah says in the Qur'an, leave and abandon them in their houses. So it becomes the obligation of the man can't kick the woman out. The man has to leave and go to his own, make his own arrangements, as it were. So the woman is not kicked out of the house. The other thing that is important to learn or to recognize is that the news of the marital disputes, this had spread. This itself was viral news throughout the whole of Medina. It's not something that was just kept under wraps. Everybody knew. So and it impacted on everyone, obviously. And on top of that, Allah revealed verses in the Qur'an relating to it, so that we would know that these things happen and this is how you deal with it. So you don't we shouldn't tell all and everything that happens between husband and wife to everyone, but it's working in the right way to try and sort these problems out. And so here the Prophet ﷺ is showing us the example of how to deal with these types of things. But the fact that the news of this had spread throughout Medina, and that was acceptable, and the fact that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, or the people in Medina knew how the other ladies in Medina knew how the wives of the Prophet ﷺ treated the Prophet ﷺ. So this, again, you'd expect that to sort of be sort of news that is sort of confined within the household, but obviously the ladies talk, and other ladies would chat with the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and they would find out, these things about the relationship. So again, that's something that we can learn from that. Again, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he tried to get involved. So again, it shows, and he wasn't. The Prophet ﷺ didn't criticize Umar for coming and chatting to him. Again, this shows that the in-laws should and can and should get involved if there are disputes going on. We also learned that when Umar found out that there was potential issues between Hafsa and the Prophet, he went to Hafsa and said, "Look, don't ask him for things, don't trouble him, come to me." So again, it's showing that that it's acceptable if the in-laws do or the parents or others do get involved if there are issues going on. And the other sort of deeper issue to recognize is that when it comes to how the role of men and women, so Islam, and we'll probably deal with this in a later study cycle, Islam doesn't, it sets out some rules and regulations, but it doesn't stipulate what happens in terms of between the marriage. So, for example, we heard from Umar how the women used to be in Mecca and then how the women are in Medina. And again, Islam doesn't come to say one is better than the other. It gives you a general guidance on sort of structural issues, but those it doesn't say that this type of feminism is better than that type of feminism. It just basically says these are the way things work, and you're free to adopt whatever social norms there are which are acceptable in that own sort of cultural melee. So that's quite a sort of a deep understanding or a deep concept with regards to the socially acceptable practices that Islam doesn't regulate to the nth degree. And again, like for example, when it comes to issues, when it comes to marriage, let's say, what are the customs that are allowed in marriage? Again, you'll see even today in all different societies that the marriage customs, they vary greatly, because of the cultural background of those people. But Islam says so long as these minimum things are mandated in the wedding, these these sort of cultural aspects of the wedding ceremony, they aren't legislated. Or the other thing, again, we just mentioned that divorce is permitted because the Prophet had divorced Hafsa once, but then Jibril was sent down to say, take her back because she's a lady who prays, who fasts, and she'll be your companion in Jannah. That's mentioned in the Qur'an. And again, we mentioned last time some of the scholars talk about ikhtiyar, or the choosing, where the husband, as the Prophet did, he gave the wives the option of divorce. So he gave, he handed over the nuclear option essentially to the wives. So rather than that staying with the man, and some scholars say that's what the meaning of given one more than the other, one over the other rather. The Prophet he gave the ability to divorce. He delegated that ability to the wives, and basically said, if you want a divorce, you will get it. It's your choice. So here are the conditions. I now delegate that choice to you. If you press the button, I'm okay with it. Prophet some didn't want the divorce, but he says, but I can divorce you, obviously, but I don't want it. But if you want it, then whatever you say, I'll go along with that. Okay, so he delegated the choice to the wife or the wives, and that is permitted, and that's called ikhtiyar. And some of the scholars say that you need to that choice should be time bound. So you say you've got this period of days or weeks or month or whatever to decide. Think about it, come to a decision, and whatever your decision, I will abide by that decision. So essentially, or technically, essentially the divorce happens at her saying, although it's a delegated responsibility, so it's still, as I say, delegated from the husband. Again and again, we have reference to that in Surah Al-Ahzab, where Allah says in the Qur'an, but if the wives desire, we will give them a gracious release. So anyway, I'll finish there, inshallah, and then from next week, inshallah, we'll talk about preparation for the farewell pilgrimage, and then also wishing everybody Ramadan Mubarak, and use these next few days to really psychologically get in the zone to get the best out of Ramadan, inshallah. So do remember us in your du'as, please. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.